G'day guys, Caleb from Rover Travel. Today I'm doing an update video on my companion Rover 70 lithium power bank. This unit here, I get so many questions about the power bank. The biggest one is, do I regret not running a dual battery system and running this over it? And the answer is simple, no. But we'll talk about why I think it's a good option and why it works for me. And I've had to change the way I do a few things, but I'm used to it now and it's a good bit of gear. I do have a full overview review video of this when I first got it. Basically what it is it is a 70 amp hour lithium power bank. And as you can see, it's not very heavy. So the companion Rover 70 lithium power bank is just that. It's a 70 amp hour lithium power bank. We've been running it for a little bit longer than 12 months. Have I had any issues with it? So one thing I've found with it is this button to turn on all these USB outlets gets a little bit sticky. So you can see I'm pushing that and nothing's happening. You've just got to push it really hard, then she comes on. Opposed to these back buttons, which you just tap them and they turn on. But other than that, that is the only dilemma I've had with this. And I'm not too upset at it really. Like, it still works, everything turns on as it should. Real quick overview again. So it's got 4 USB 2.0s, 1 USB 3. So then it's got 2 SIG socket style plugs. One's a proper SIG style and the other is an angle style. I've never actually used the angle style one just because I haven't bothered converting anything. Just show you quickly, that is the angle style plug. I did buy one with the intention to convert my fridge, but then I decided against it. And that's just because of the way I use it, which I'll go through that in a second. And it's got a little torch, which I've never used, but I do still like the idea of it. So the Rover 70 suits me because I'm always moving. It's very rare that I set up camp and stay in any place for a long time. So this thing, whilst I'm driving, it's always on charge. And the way I use it is I run my fridge off the car, and then when I pull up and set up for the afternoon for the night, that's when I convert everything back over to the power bank itself. When I initially got it, I had the idea that I'd be able to plug it in off the SIG socket, run power into that, and then run all my gear off of the Rover 70. What I found is that doesn't work. So whilst it's still taking charge, I find that the amount of charge that comes through the SIG socket is far less than the amount of power you put out. Another thing that's a little bit hard to judge with the Rover 70 unit is you've actually only just got like a battery percentage. So it just tells you, like, right now you can see it's 100%. It'll also show you input and output when you've got things running. So when you've got power going into it, it shows you how many watts are going into it, which is great. But the only issue I have is that you don't know what them watts convert to as a percentage, which I'm sure there's some electrical equation to it, but I don't know what that is. But all I know is that when I'm running it off the car and it's got watts going into it, and I'm running the fridge off it, the watts coming out are more than the watts going in, which means that your battery's depleting. When it comes to like a traditional dual battery setup, obviously you can't run this like that, where you're driving along, it's charging your second battery, and then your second battery is running all your auxiliary stuff. So when I'm using the Rover 70, I run a 12 volt fridge off it, camp lights, like LED camp lights, and then charging your phone. Generally when I'm full driving, I've got my phone on my magnetic holder and it's plugged in on charge when I'm driving anyway. So the main thing it runs is the fridge, which draws power. So what I've found is if I forget to charge it, I generally get about 2.5, 3 nights out of it. The other thing I've found is when the battery gauge says 0, it still runs. So it'll run for hours and hours past the 0%. For me and the way I use it, I find it works because, like I say, I'm generally driving all day or full driving all day or whatever I'm doing. It's very rare that I set up and just stay in one spot for a long time or even a day. So I find that I run my fridge off the car and then I just change everything over to the power bank at night. So that's why it works for me. I would say that if you're gonna set up for a long period of time, you definitely want to put solar input into it. It took me a little while to get used to using the power bank because I had a secondary battery and ran everything off that secondary battery forever and a day. So I was just used to it all charging and working, and you're not having to actually physically do anything. Whereas this, you've got to make sure you unplug your fridge from the car, plug it into the battery bank. Once you get used to doing that, it's okay. The thing that caught me out a lot in the early days was when I'd wake up from camp and we'd prepare for the next day, pack up, and I was a bit dusty and I'd forget to unplug that and change things back over. And I'd run the fridge off that all day. And then when I got to the end of the day, I was like, oh no, I don't have much percentage to run the fridge at night. So that caught me out a few times in the early days. But now I'm used to it. I'm used to unplugging, changing it over, and it doesn't take stuff all to do. So we just talked about charging of the Rover 70. So you've got a 12 volt SIG adapter for it. So you can plug it in, charge it off your car while you're driving. You've also got your mains charger, and then also you've got solar inputs, solar adapter for it. So 50 amp to 30 amp, and then it just plugs into solar panels. This also has a built-in solar regulator, so you just plug it straight in. You don't need a regulator for your solar panels. What I find is I just leave this cord in my solar panels, and then I make sure I take my solar panels on big trips, just for when I forget to charge it. One thing I'll say is the Companion 200 watt solar panels, the soft panels that I use, I find that if I forget to charge it, they charge it the quickest. So even with low sun, like late in the afternoon, the amount of times they saved my ass in the early days is unbelievable. If I didn't have solar panels in the early days, I probably still wouldn't be using the power bank now, because the amount of times I forgot to charge it, I would have said, this is no good, I can't live with this. What I found charging wise on the run is the SIG socket. That gives you about 3% an hour, 3 to 4. Running mains power gives you about 7 to 8. I run that through just a CAN inverter, but I'll show you how I set that up and charge it on the run, because that's the way that I charge it and use it now. And then the solar panels, I generally found are around 10% an hour, 10 to 12, something like that. This is my real technical charging setup. So the Patrol's got a SIG socket just there in the center. Generally throw the CAN inverter in the cup holder, and the reason I do that is because I can see the power light on the inverter, and then that just sits on the floor. But that's it. So I find that for me was the easiest way. I like to have it somewhere where I can see it, so I know it's charging. So if I do forget, or halfway through the day, I generally go, oh, the inverter's here, but I haven't hooked the power bank up to it. I better make sure I do that. I miss having a permanent mounted system. Not anymore. There's only one time where I thought I made the wrong decision, and that was on my first big trip, where I ran the Rover off of the car and everything off the Rover, and by the time I got up into Inskip Point, I think we'd spent about 12 hours in the car. I think that had about 30% charge left in it. I thought, oh no, we're in trouble here, this is day one. By the time we got on the Fraser the next day and we drove around majority of the day and had that on charge or on solar, it was back up in the high percentages, so it was fine. That's when I learned all about the percentages with the SIG socket versus using the inverter and the mains cord. Lucky I had both with me. And like I say, the mains cord charges it twice as quick with that CAN inverter than what the SIG socket does, so that's definitely the way to do it. And then I'm pretty sure the second day I forgot to charge it as well, and we set up at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but threw the solar panels out, and before I knew it, after a handful of beers, it was back up in like the mid percentages as well, so half charged. So we didn't have a drama with that. So I learned a lot in the early days about how to use this thing. Don't get me wrong, there's still times where I forget to charge it, but I've never run out of power, so I think it's still a good option. Do I think it's good value? In the early days when I first got this, it was about $1,400. So at that price point, you could have mounted a dual battery in the car. You probably could have got a lithium dual battery for not a lot more. Nowadays, these things I've seen them for as low as $800. If you can get one of these for $800, every day of the week it is worth it. They are unreal. The other question I get a lot, could you live off this thing? Could you rely off a 70 amp hour power bank for a week? You could, but you need to have input into it. So whether you do the same thing I do, where you full drive a lot and you charge it, or if you set up camp for a long time and you run solar to it, I don't think there'd be a drama in the world, but that thing will not last you a week without input. I find that you probably get 2.5, 3 days out of it, depending on how much straw you've got out of it, what you're trying to run off it, etc. Still a good option though. The other thing I'll say as well is I find that with the Companion solar panels, even with no sun or cloud, that thing will still charge. It'll still draw power through them panels. I don't know how it does it, but it'll still charge even if there's no sunlight. Even well into twilight as it's getting dark and you think, oh, there's no way this is charging, it'll still be taking input. The other thing I find a lot is people tell me, oh, it's plastic and it's crap and it's Chinese rubbish or whatever it be, right? I find durability wise, haven't had a drama with it. That's alloy, that silver bit. Obviously all the top bit's plastic. Let's say that button's a little bit dicky. That's probably the only thing that annoys me. Handle wise, use that all the time. Haven't had drama with it. As you can see, just normal wear and tear, like what you would expect of something that comes camping and rolls around the back of a full drive. I think quality wise and build quality wise, it's on point. I think it's good enough for the majority of people. There you have it. That's my Companion Rover 70 lithium power bank. I think it's great. I think it's a good option, especially if you can get it at these new price points. Like I say, I've seen them well under $1,000 these days. Other than the few hiccups I had in the early days, which were all user error, I haven't had drama with it since. I think they're a good option. I definitely reckon that they're worth looking at. The power bank, it's changed the way I do things, but I do like it. I like that it's small, I like that it's compact. I like that I can take it wherever. I do like having the option to be able to move it around. I like that it doesn't weigh much. There's a heap of pros to it as far as I'm concerned, and I think they're a good bit of kit. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. If there's anything I haven't answered that you want to know, feel free to comment it below. I get questions about this all the time. More than happy to talk about it. If you like what you see, feel free to subscribe. And until next time, guys, go travel.